Ladies and gentlemen, good afternoon. I'd like to welcome everyone to a Military Personnel Subcommittee hearing on military voting. Today, the subcommittee meets to hear the testimony on military and overseas voting from the Department of Defense, local election officials, and a military officer who was a voting assistance officer while deployed to Afghanistan during the 2010 election. Our witnesses have traveled a long distance to help us understand how members of the armed forces and their families, along with the U.S. civilians living and working outside the United States, are afforded the opportunity to exercise their right to vote. I want to welcome our witnesses, and I look forward to their testimony. Voting is a fundamental and essential part of the democratic process. It is both our right and our duty as citizens of a democracy to set the direction of the nation by selecting the individuals who will represent us at each level of government. This responsibility remains with us regardless of where we choose to live and work, or, as in the case of our service members, where they are sent to defend freedom. For many years, Congress has been concerned about military and overseas voters who have told us about the difficulties they face when they try to cast their ballots. Registering to vote, receiving a ballot by mail, and returning the ballot by mail in time for the vote to count an election when the voter is not physically located in the U.S. is challenging at best. One can only imagine the difficulty trying to accomplish the same process when the voter is at a remote outpost in Afghanistan fighting a war. Yet these are the very individuals who, through their military service, protect our right to vote. Congress has worked hard over the last several years to ensure that the men and women assigned overseas on behalf of our country do not lose their ability to vote as a result of their service. A number of federal laws have been enacted to enable the military and U.S. citizens abroad to vote in federal elections. Most recently, Congress enacted the Military and Overseas Voter Empowerment MOVE Act as part of the National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2010. The MOVE Act required the Department of Defense to make several changes to the federal voting assistance program to improve the process by which military absentee voters cast their ballots. I look forward to hearing from our DoD witnesses how these improvements have been implemented within the Department. I am also interested to know how the changes to FVAP affected the military and overseas voter in the 2010 election. Were more military and overseas voters able to cast their ballots in time for them to be counted in the election? In addition, a successful military voting assistance program depends on the collaborative efforts of the Department of Defense with the military voting assistance officers in the field and state and local officials. I'm very pleased we have two local elected officials with us today. First, we have from my home state, but more importantly to me, my home county. I'm very honored that we have the Registrar and Director of Elections of Lexington County, South Carolina. And additionally, from San Diego, California, we have the Registrar from the home of the Ranking Member, Susan Davis. We also have with us today a voting assistance officer who had to find a way to get deployed soldiers the election information they needed. I look forward to hearing their perspectives on how to best assist military and overseas voters cast an absentee ballot. I will close by saying that every day our troops lay their lives on the line to defend freedom, and it's our job to make sure that they are not denied the right to vote. Before I introduce our panel, let me offer Congresswoman Susan Davis of California an opportunity to make her opening remarks.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe it is so important that we're having this hearing today. We all know that voting is an important responsibility as an American citizen. It's fundamental to the continued success of our democratic society. Over the past several years, Congress has taken significant steps to improve the voting process for Americans, and specifically for our military personnel and their families. The National Defense Authorization Act for fiscal year 2010 included the Military and Overseas Voter Empowerment Act, which sought to further enhance the voting experience for military service members. And these included, and my colleague has enumerated some of them. If I may, I wanted to just broaden that a little, even in the time that we have, included the requirement for states to send out requested ballots at least 45 days before an election, allows voter registration applications and absentee ballot applications to be sent by mail or electronically. It expands the use of federal write-in ballots to include primaries, runoffs, and special elections. It prohibits states from rejecting otherwise valid voter registration applications on the basis of notarization requirements or restrictions on paper or envelope type. And it required the development of online portals of information, and also required the service secretaries to designate offices on military installations to provide information on voter registration procedures and absentee ballot procedures, information, and assistance to military personnel. I'm very interested in hearing from Mr. Carey, the Director of the Federal Voting Assistance Program, on how these changes have been implemented by the states and the Department of Defense, and what issues were found during the last election. I'm also very pleased that we have Captain Angel Jackson Gillespie here from the 101st Airborne, who was a voting assistance officer while deployed in Afghanistan. I certainly hope that you will share with us, with the subcommittee, your experiences and areas or issues of concern or success that you think will help us as we continue to improve the voting process for service members, their families, and Americans living and working abroad. We have two individuals who are directly involved in the process on the ground level. Mr. Dean Crapes, Director of Lexington County Commission of Registration, North Carolina, of course, and Ms. Deborah Seiler, Registrar of Voters from San Diego, California. I want to welcome you both, and thank you for coming so far, particularly from San Diego on such short notice. I invited Deborah to be here today, not just because she's in my district, but because she runs a first-class operation and can make a valuable contribution to our hearing. San Diego is the 6th largest county in the country, and coordinating activities for 2,300 precincts and counting over 1.2 million ballots each election is difficult and probably feels at times like a thankless task. Deborah works tirelessly so that everyone gets a chance to vote and make sure that everybody votes only once. Deborah, Deborah and her staff put voters first. With about 100,000 active duty military personnel stationed at bases in our county, they take pride in making sure the registrar's office is attuned to the unique needs of military voters. And that's why they've been known to communicate with service members in the middle of the night and even coordinate ballot delivery with sailors at their next port of call. So Mr. Chairman, let me welcome all of our witnesses. Thank you very much again for the hearing. I look forward to an open and productive dialogue.
Thank you, Ms. Davis. And we are joined today by an outstanding panel. We'd like to give each witness the opportunity to present his or her testimony, and to each member who is here an opportunity to ask questions. We will be looking for a summary of your written testimony that will be included in the record. Additionally, in particular, I want to thank Mr. Robert H. Carey, Director of the Federal Voting Assistance Program, the Defense Human Resources Activity, Captain Angel Jackson Gillespie, U.S. Army 2nd Brigade Combat Team, the 101st Airborne from Fort Campbell, Kentucky, and I'm very grateful to know that she was also trained at Fort Jackson, South Carolina, so I know she has excellent training. And Mr. Dean Crapes, Director of the Lexington County Registration and Elections Commission, and Ms. Deborah Seiler, the San Diego County Registrar of Voters. And we will begin first with Mr. Carey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Representative Davis, members of the committee. Thank you for this opportunity to testify on military voting and the Department of Defense's Military Voting Assistance Program. I also thank you for including my complete written testimony in today's record. As you said, my name is Bob Carey, and I'm the Director of the Federal Voting Assistance Program and have been since July 2009. After graduation from college, I joined the Navy, and I continue to serve in the Navy Reserves today. I've been both an overseas civilian voter and a military voter. I voted by absentee ballot for 21 straight years. With that experience, upon my arrival at the Federal Voting Assistance Program, we used data from the 2008 post-election surveys of military personnel and local election officials data, I may add, that's been developed statistically through a statistically rigorous survey methodology, refined over decades, to restructure the voting assistance program to more effectively support military voters' most crucial needs. That 2008 election data showed the most significant problem for military voters was not registration. It was not even voter participation rates. When adjusted for the substantial age and gender differences between the general population and the military was registered at and voted at higher rates in the 2008 election than did the general population. But when it came to successfully returning an absentee ballot sent to them, the difference was remarkable. 91% of the general population successfully returned their absentee ballots in 2008, but only 62% of the military did. Given this, the Federal Voting Assistance Program shifted to a system of direct-to-the-voter assistance, predominantly through online tools, to allow the limited voting assistance officer resources to be more focused where needed, and to serve more greatly the underserved and underperforming populations. To provide that direct-to-the-voter assistance, the Department automated the voter registration, absentee ballot, and backup ballot forms with online wizards. Before, military voting assistance officers had to help the voter fill out the form by hand, referencing back to this 466-page compendium of various state laws and regulations regarding military voting. Now, the military voter can easily and seamlessly complete these forms online by answering a series of simple and intuitive questions, generally in the 5 to 8 minute range, even being presented all of their federal candidates in the online ballot wizard as well. Additionally, the Department worked with 17 states to deploy fully automated online blank ballot delivery systems that also provided for online marking in most cases, where the voter could access the complete ballot at a secure website, and in most cases mark that online, print it out, sign it, and return it. 14 states also deployed their own online ballot delivery systems. The Department believes that such online ballot availability represents the best long-term method of ensuring voters have timely and successful access to all their ballots by allowing them to retrieve their ballot wherever and however they can. To raise voter awareness of these tools and key voting deadlines, the Department also executed an aggressive, integrated strategic communications plan to reach these voters through multiple communications channels. Print and online advertisements, I think we have a couple of versions of that. You can see we ran full-page ads in a number of papers, including Defense Times, Stars and Stripes, Military Spouse Magazine, International Herald Tribune. We did an extensive social media campaign, RSS feeds, earned media, internal media, direct communications through unit and installation voting assistance officers, banners and outside of installation gates and commissaries and exchanges, and force-wide emails are all used to inform military voters about upcoming elections, the procedures for registering and requesting an absentee ballot, and how best and most successfully to return those absentee ballots. The Federal Voting Assistance Program has and will continue to work very closely with the services as they execute the Installation Voter Assistance Office mandate of the MOVE Act. However, the Department believes those mandates are costly, manpower intensive, and require significant effort for the services to implement. Those implementing these programs in the field believe it may actually be counterproductive to an effective voting assistance office program by removing that, by taking those resources away from the unit level where they can be most precisely and quickly delivered. The Department believes all the new voting assistance requirements mandated by the MOVE Act at the installation level, including the voting assistance requirements of the National Voter Registration Act, can be more efficiently accomplished at the unit level, at far less cost and with far greater effectiveness, and focus more specifically on deployed personnel and underperforming segments of the voting population. Legislatively, the Department believes the states should only need to report their military and overseas voting statistics to the Department of Defense. Currently, states report statistics to both the Department of Defense and Election Assistance Commission. The MOVE Act, however, made the Secretary of Defense the lead agency on post-election military and overseas voting data collection and reporting. Therefore, the Department recommends the Department of Defense be the sole data collection agency to reduce the survey burden on states and local election officials and provide for full integration with the Department's other post-election surveys, which capture much of the voting behavior that cannot be captured by the reporting data that is provided by the states to the Election Assistance Commission. Mr. Chairman, Representative Davis, members of the committee, I stand ready for your questions.
Thank you very much. And Captain?
Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Davis, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, thank you so much for the opportunity to appear today and to represent the Army and the soldiers of the 101st Airborne Division, Screaming Eagles, at this hearing. My name is Captain Angel Jackson Gillespie from 526th Brigade Support Battalion. I am an Adjutant General Corps officer, and I've served on active duty for 9 years. I enlisted in 2001 and received my commission as an Air Defense Officer in 2004. I served initially at Fort Bliss, Texas, as an Air Defense Platoon Leader, Company Executive Officer, and Battalion S1 in a Patriot Air Defense Unit. I am currently the Battalion Adjutant for the 526th Brigade Support Battalion, 101st Airborne Division. In this position, I am responsible for all personnel actions for a 970-soldier unit with the mission of providing logistical support to an infantry brigade combat team within the 101st. Currently, I serve as the voting assistance officer. Most recently, I served in this capacity during my unit's deployment to Operation Enduring Freedom from May 2010 to April 2011. During this time, I provided voting assistance to approximately 600 soldiers spread across a wide area of operations in RC South, based outside Kandahar City, Afghanistan. I'm proud to be able to say that the young soldiers I served with were well engaged in the voting process, even while deployed in harm's way. While deployed, we requested and received voting information from the Federal Voting Assistance Program to ensure material was on hand for soldiers in theater. We used the Federal Voting Assistance Program website extensively, as it provided all the information we needed to assist soldiers with both registration and absentee ballots. In addition, we designated primary and alternate company-level voting assistance officers to further assist soldiers with the voting process. I received frequent emails from the Federal Voting Assistance Program on pending elections that I, in turn, disseminated to our company-level voting assistance officers. To assist our companies, my team and I also used a database to identify soldiers by home of record to notify them of upcoming elections. Additionally, I served as a voting assistance officer in several other positions prior to my current one. Over time, I've seen significant improvement in access to voting assistance material. Thank you again for the chance to represent the Army and my unit by appearing in front of the subcommittee today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you very much for your service. Mr. Krebs.
Okay. I'm honored to be here, Mr. Chairman. There, as I am, my name is Dean Crapes. I'm the Director of Voter Registration in Lexington County in South Carolina. And also, being a veteran myself, I always have voted. I joined in 1980 and in the Marine Corps until 1980, and I understand the need to provide this opportunity to basically to all veterans worldwide. In 1992, the General Assembly passed legislation to allow electronic transmission of ballots in emergency situations only. In 1998, South Carolina participated in the voting over the Internet sponsored by the Department of Defense. South Carolina was not only the state participating, but the only state to participate on a statewide basis. In 2004, South Carolina was invited and ready to accept an invitation to participate in SERV, Secure Electronic Registration and Voting Experiment. And unfortunately, this was canceled by 2004, but in 2004, HAVA came on board then. The ballot request there with HAVA was for a period of 2 general elections. This requirement made it very difficult for election officials due to the movement of UOCAVA voters as much as they do, usually about 2 years at one place. And then the Military Overseas Deployment Act of 2009 removed that requirement and basically said we will remove that requirement and state annually beginning 1 January of each year we'll start taking requests for absentee voting for that year. So we've already started taking them this year for what we have in 2011 November for municipal elections. To apply for a UOCAVA absentee ballot, just simply contact the office. We will direct them, if they're military, to a FPC, which is a Federal Postcard application. If they do not have one or have access to one, we will email one to them to have them fill it out and send it back to us. And upon completion of that, then we will file according to elections that individual is authorized to vote in. South Carolina has approximately 82,000 voters that's covered by this act. Lexington County had in 2008 in the presidential election, Lexington County 89% for UOCAVA return rate and 97% for non-UOCAVA. In 2010, we had a 91% UOCAVA and a 97% for UOCAVA, so it's on the increase there. Next year, with the 2012 presidential elections coming around, I expect that number to get even more and even have more returns from there. In Lexington County, one individual with one email address is designated a responsible person in this absentee UOCAVA voting process. He has a specific fax and an email address for people to get into. So if someone comes into me, I immediately refer it to him. He takes care of all the contacts need to be to the UOCAVA voter there. We send out whatever needs to be done to get taken care of the individual there. Once the voted ballot comes in, it is immediately printed, is placed in an envelope and sealed, and then placed into a ballot box where it's not touched again until Election Day. And that's where trained individuals, along with appointed election commission members, receive an oath, open, duplicate to a hard ballot, which can be read optically, so we can basically get the tally of the votes in the night there. During the June primaries, which is we have primaries in our state, so we still have a majority vote. We have what we call an instant runoff ballot, which is basically any office or of any office that or party for any office that has more than 2 potential candidates per office. We have an instant runoff ballot, which basically has the choices listed. For example, first choice, second choice, third choice, fourth choice. That is sent along with the UOCAVA ballot for them to have that comes back to us, and we separate those two out when it comes back. The instructions on how to vote the instant runoff ballot is in there. Therefore, because it takes about approximately 45 days to transit with mail, but if we already take care of that problem at first with the instant runoff ballot, then we know exactly what the first, second, or third, or fourth choices is for candidates if there is a runoff. And then our commission duplicate that onto a hard ballot, which we can actually vote electronically. Count electronically. My apologies there. In closing, the ultimate goal is to provide an instant access to the voter registration absentee process for UOCAVA voters. And I know this is all UOCAVA voters, but we give the same attention to any voter in Lexington County or South Carolina that wants to vote absentee. Voters and to steadily increase success rate for returning ballots percentage as equal to that of the general absentee voting population. And in this moment, thank you. I'll entertain any questions there also.
Thank you very much. And I think it should be noted, you're being very humble. The county that you represent is one of the fastest growing counties in the United States.
Thank you.
And so as you approach issues, they're ever changing and ever getting larger. So again, appreciate your service.
Yeah, so they always said the good news is Lexington County is growing. The bad news is Lexington County is growing.
That's it. It's a challenge, and you face it. Thank you very much. Ms. Deborah Seiler.
Thank you, Chairman Wilson, Ranking Member Davis, and distinguished members of the committee for inviting me here today to testify regarding military voting. I'm Deborah Seiler, Registrar of Voters for the County of San Diego. San Diego County is the second most populous county in California behind Los Angeles, and its population is greater than that of 21 states. It's home to a very large domestic military population, in addition to military personnel stationed abroad. Most prominent installations known are Camp Pendleton and one home of the Navy SEALs out on Coronado Island. As registrar, I'm mindful of the unique challenges facing military and overseas voters. Military voters abroad are stationed in remote locations where mail delivery can be delayed, and they may lack access to news regarding upcoming elections. The transitory nature of their assignments creates a challenge to register to vote timely and to maintain current address information. Our office has taken a series of steps to help these voters, beginning with the voter registration process. For the benefit of all voters, including those in the military, we've posted our county-specific voter registration form online for easy access at any time and from any location throughout the world. The form is interactive and prompts the voter to supply essential information. Because the voter keys in that information, the data we receive is legible and complete, and no follow-up is required with that particular voter. Our office also works hard to ensure military ballots and election materials are mailed on or before the 45th day before each election. Of course, many military voters do not register or do not update their mailing address until this 45-day mailing occurs. For these late registrants, we send frequent supplemental mailings, and as Election Day approaches, we increase our use of email and fax technology to distribute the ballots. For example, in October, prior to the November 2008 presidential election, we received an email from 2 Navy servicemen stationed in Iraq. The email was sent 25 days before the election, and the servicemen had not received their ballots because they had not supplied us with their mailing address in Iraq, so the ballots went to San Diego. Staff emailed a second ballot to each of the 2 men who both voted their ballots, scanned them, and returned them to us by email as a PDF document. They had no fax capability where they were deployed. Following that election, we were informed that the Secretary of State interprets California law to permit voted ballots to be returned by fax, but not by email, and we had to discontinue this process. California election officials are concerned with this law because fax technology has become increasingly obsolete, yet email is prevalent. 19 states permit voted ballots to be returned by email, and California elections officials support legislation this year to permit that for our voters as well. The legislation was not approved, unfortunately, due to security concerns, and it's our opinion that these concerns are no greater for email technology than for fax technology. We have no evidence of any actual abuse, and we will continue to advocate for this technology for our military voters stationed abroad. My testimony contains additional information, examples of our service, and other recommendations. I'm happy to answer any questions from the committee.
Thank you very much, and thank all of you. The procedure we'll be going through now is a questioning for a 5-minute period by each member who are here. We're very fortunate that Jeanette James has volunteered to keep the time, to keep us within our limit. I want to, beginning first, I want to defer immediately to Congressman Allen West of Florida. We're very proud that at 2:30 he has been selected to be the Speaker Pro Tem on the House floor.
That's because everyone has flown out of here already.
This is a high honor that a retired colonel from the Army should deserve. So I defer to Colonel West.
It's called being the low man on the duty roster. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and also Ranking Member, and thank you to the panel for being here. And as some of you know, I spent about 22 years active duty service in the United States military, so this is very important for me, for the friends of mine that are still out there, to include my young nephew. So I have 3 short questions. The first question is, the Overseas Vote Foundation recently released its report from the 2010 election. One of the problems I see here is that 5,257 military and overseas voters completed that survey, but only 107, 3% of the respondents were military. Is there any means, or is there any thoughts about coming back and reconducting a survey in this year, or maybe something leading up to the 2012 election cycle, which maybe we can get an even better snapshot as far as military respondents?
Mr. West, if I may, the Federal Voting Assistance Program actually conducts a statistically random sample survey of all military personnel, and we've done that in 2006, 2008, 2010, and we'll continue to do that every 2 years. Okay. And that uses the Status of Forces survey methodology. Mm-hmm. This year we also initiated a survey of military spouses to see what their voting behavior was like. We're trying to figure out how to best be able to do one for overseas civilians. But we don't know what the total number of overseas civilians is in the first place, as well as doing it of Department of State voting assistance offices, military voting assistance offices, and local election officials.
Okay. All right. Thank you. The next question, the MOVE Act said that it would eliminate notarization requirements, but the report found that there were still many states where absentee ballots requested such notarization signatures. If you could provide back to this committee the states that maybe still made that a requirement in 2010, because that's something that the MOVE Act said we would get away from, but if there's still states out there requiring that, that's a violation of the MOVE Act. So if you could get that back to the committee, I'd be very appreciative.
I'll bring it back for the record, sir.
Thank you. And the last question. Spent 2.5 years in Kandahar, so I know it very well. Appreciate your service there. And of course, you understand the very remote nature of some of those forward operating bases we have. As a matter of fact, 3 weeks ago, I visited a village stabilization platform. You know, now we're starting to push out our special operators into some very remote areas. And when I look down and see that we're requiring 45 days, I mean, the ballot has to be mailed 45 days out. When you think of some of these places where we have our special operators especially, but also now we're starting to use conventional forces in these areas, you take into account weather effects, you know, sandstorms. You take into account the breakdown of aircraft, because we don't want people out doing many long logistical road type of convoys. Do you think, Captain Jackson Gillespie, that looking at Terran Coat, Spinboldak, some of those places, that 45 days from it being mailed here overseas is adequate enough time? Do we think we may need to extend that based upon some of these remote locations?
Sir, I do believe 45 days would be enough time. It takes about about 2 weeks for mails to get into theater and down to the fobs where we are, and we immediately push mail out to those outlying cops and fobs, sir. So I do believe 45 days would probably be substantial. However, if they're standing up, further out, anytime you stand up a new unit, it's going to take time to establish a system to get mail and communications out to those fobs and cops. So once established, I think it is enough time, sir.
Okay, and final question. Any good commander, before they go into a military operation, they do a rehearsal. Is a possibility that before we get into the next major general election cycle in 2012, we may just look to do a snapshot rehearsal of this voting procedure to see if there are any, possibility, glitches, obstacles, loopholes, so that we can have lessons learned, we can apply them by the time we get to November 2012.
Definitely look into that, sir. I think it'd be something that we could definitely try to see if it's possible.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Colonel. And at this time, we proceed with Ms. Susan Davis of California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And if I could start with you, Mr. Kerry, we all know how critical this is, certainly for those who have sacrificed so much for our country to make sure that this works well. And we know that there certainly were some glitches. But I also know that we tried to put this on a pretty short time frame, from the time it was enacted to the time everybody had to move forward with the 2010 election, which, as I understand it, ordinarily, if we have to make a major change, we have about 2 years to do that. So I wonder if you would address some of the concerns that people have, and if you think that these were just some one-time issues as people were adjusting to changes in the regulations that the MOVE Act required, or what of those problems are we likely to see again? What's perhaps systemic in that would be a problem? And I know you talked about the unit level and how important that was.
Yes, ma'am. For the Installation Voting Assistance Office program, the continuing resolution continuing through April was problematic in that it prohibited new starts and made it difficult for the services to be able to start up the program. We're essentially making these programs out of whole cloth at the installation level, when in fact for a long time we've been doing it at the unit level. The other issue is that the change of duty station process is migrating from the installation level to the unit level, supported by online applications, whereas before you'd go to the Readiness Support Group or the Joint Administrative Center or the Personnel Support Detachment and talk to the pay folks and the medical folks. Now you're doing that all at the unit level. And I'm concerned that we're going to leave an orphan voting assistance program at the installation level, and frankly, it's going to be very difficult for people to understand why they have to leave their unit, go to the installation, when they can just talk to the unit voting assistance officer and get it that much quicker. So that's probably one of the big concerns about this. I mean, the services are trying to move heaven and earth to make this happen as soon as possible. But given the hiring freezes, the civilian personnel cuts, it's difficult to just turn this on.
Mm-hmm. Well, thank you. And so those are some things that we should be anticipating or could be problematic.
Well, I think that approximately 80% of all the installation voting assistance offices are now established. The Marine Corps says that they'll have all 18 of theirs up and running by August 11th. And I believe that the Air Force will have all theirs up and running by the end of the fiscal year. That'll complete all the services. Mm-hmm. So I think that we'll have a much better ability. But there's still the issue of might we be able to spend these resources better if we focus it at the unit level and allow it to be a little more tailored.
Yeah, thank you. I appreciate that. And certainly, I mean, it seems to me that there's also an education issue here as well, encouraging and making sure that service members are voting, that they know that actually there's a lot of assistance out there for them. And we want to make sure that they know that. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
I wanted to turn to Ms. Seiler just to look at some of the ways in which I think we can actually make this better for our military and overseas voters, and to enable them to be able to track their ballots, which is an issue that we certainly have been involved in. And I wonder if you could tell us how tracking is working and how you think this might serve the military voter.
Well, thank you.
And maybe you can explain for me what that means.
Yes. Okay.
Thank you.
Let me just tell you that in our office in 2008, we implemented a ballot tracking system, both for ballots as well as for voter registration. So currently, any voter from any location throughout the world can log into our website. They can determine what their voter registration status is. They can determine their political party. They simply have to enter their birth date, their home address, and their zip code, and they can figure out if they are registered to vote. We have had about 350,000 hits on that site since we implemented it in 2008. So it's working very well. In addition to tracking the voter registration status, of course, voters can track to determine whether their mail ballot has been issued and whether it's been returned. For example, in the 1 month, the 29-day period prior to the November 2010 election we just had, we had about 156,000 people access that site. So we have had tremendous success with our ballot tracking program.
As we're acknowledging, that's something that certainly Californians can do that. They can track their ballots, but individuals in other states cannot at this time. So we're really learning from the military, and I appreciate that. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And we now proceed to Mr. Kaufman of Colorado.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, Mr. Kerry, if we accept your assertion that recent reports are skewed as to military voting participation, and participation rates were not worse in 2010 compared to 2006, it still doesn't appear as if the situation is significantly improved. And with the 2012 election cycle starting in a mere 6 months, I don't see us on track to see increases next year either. What will be improved between 2012 and 2010?
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. I'd say that first, there was a substantial improvement between 2006 and 2010. The 2006 voter participation rate from the active duty military survey showed a 22 to 24% voter participation rate. And in 2010, we're showing approximately a 29% voter participation rate. Now, that's about a 20 to 30% increase. And the regular voter participation rate for the general population was only about 41%. Now, about half the military, 60% of the military is under 29, but only about 20% of the general population is. And voter participation rates for the younger voters are much lower. So when we do that age and gender adjustment, the military voter participation rate has, in 2008, and it appears to be in 2010, we're still finalizing those numbers, appears to exceed that of the general population. The one age cohort we're having problems is in the 18 to 24-year-olds, with which we identified in the 2008 post-election report. And so we're trying to expand that ability to reach out to the 18 to 24-year-olds, as well as to the military spouses. We have a $16.2 million program that just closed out, grant program to the states to be able to deploy even more online ballot delivery systems that we can then direct the voter to through our online portal. And then we're also working with the military postal system in order to be able to improve even more upon their 5.2-day ballot return average time in order to be able to try to improve those rates, sir.
Let me just say, as someone who served in Iraq with the United States Marine Corps and was not able to vote in my own state's election in 2005, I take this issue pretty seriously. And let me just say this as well, that I think comparing the young men and women to the same age demographic of their civilian counterparts is a real, I think, understatement as to really the quality of our men and women in the military. I mean, according to the United States Army, 70% of young people today are ineligible to enlist in the United States Army. So I think probably you might re-examine that. To the voting assistance officer, Captain, in your experience, would military voters be willing to sacrifice the privacy and secrecy of their ballots in order to return the ballots by fax or email rather than through the postal system?
Sir, I can't speak for all military personnel. I think of those who are going to vote and are willing to vote, they would probably get their have their vote counted whichever way they can, and especially in a deployed environment, they would probably use that those tools by email if they could. So, can't speak for all, but I know I would, sir.
Thank you. And let me ask a question to the election officers, to both of you. Do you send absentee ballots by military voters separately, or are they sent in the same way as regular absentee ballots? I know that certain states, this has been problematic for certain states, given their schedule for primary elections and stuff like that differ, but I know Colorado had difficulty complying with the requirement.
Thank you, sir. In San Diego County, we have for many years been sending our military ballots at 45 days before the election to those voters in combat zones. We had worked this out with our U.S. Postal Service representatives. We worked very closely with them, and they had advised us that 45 days was a good target date for people in combat zones. Then we were mailing at 39 days for those people in non-combat zones. We have, with the MOVE Act, we have changed that now so that all of those military and overseas ballots go out at 45 days for all elections. And this is not simply for the federal elections, but we try to meet that target for every election.
Yes, sir. We have two ways, and we do email or fax ballots after they've been qualified for an election. Now, we do have a cover sheet that goes along with it. They have to sign, letting them know they understand that this is done by maybe unsecure means of transmitting the ballot. But when the ballot comes back to us, it's immediately printed and stuffed in an envelope and then put in the ballot box and immediately taken off of the computer that the person received it in and then put onto a separate file. Also, the other one, we have an envelope here that's a red envelope that is a sort of an attention getter to the U.S. mail to, this is a UOCAVA ballot, make it happen pretty quick. And the 45 days has been adequate with us there, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you very much. And we proceed with Dr. Heck of Nevada.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The first question I have is, what kind of recommendations would you make to strengthen the safeguards put in place by UOCAVA and the MOVE Act? Because I'm looking at the report from the Overseas Vote Foundation for the 2010 election results, and they still report that 33% of military and overseas voters reported attempting to vote, but were unable to because they didn't receive their ballot or they received it too late. And so we've heard that 45 days is enough, but 33% attempted but didn't get it in time or didn't get it back in time. And while that represented a decrease from 50% for 2008, I think we would all agree that 33% is still unacceptable for our overseas voters. In addition, I find it odd that they said that those who used electronic means to request a ballot were less likely to receive a ballot than those who did not, and that although the MOVE Act eliminated requirements for notarization, some states continue to require that. So what would the recommendations be from those of you on the panel to strengthen these safeguards to make sure that everybody gets their ballot in time and can return it in time and make the process easier?
Okay, thank you, sir. One of the recommendations that we would like to offer, if it were possible, would be to ensure in some manner that we have current, up-to-date mailing address information. As I said in my testimony, for those voters who are registered with us and have up-to-date mailing information, we can send that mailing out at 45 days. It's highly effective. It's those personnel whose address has changed and we don't know about it until after that 45-day mailing that I think are really what's creating the issue for us and for the voter. And in those cases, we send our supplemental mailings, we send ballots by email, by fax, however we can get the ballot to them, but the time is shortened. If there was some semi-automatic way that we could be informed, maybe if we had access to a database that the military services provided so that we could match our database against a database provided by the military that indicates movement, so we could capture that at, say, 55 days before the election, we would have those updated addresses ready to go for that 45-day mailing. I think that would be a huge benefit to us and to the voters.
Anybody with any other recommendations?
Sort of follow up on that. We have a system in place to be able to try to provide updated addresses. The problem is that I believe it's 10 U.S.C. Section 123 prohibits the Department from releasing the mailing address of military personnel assigned to a deployable unit. Right. And so that limits our ability to be able to, I'm not exactly sure that title and section. I know it's 10 U.S.C., but I think it's Section 123. And so that might be something that needs reconsideration. We're working with the Defense Manpower Data Center to see if we can actually open up the DEERS or the DEEDS database to state election officials or maybe the adjutants general to be able to provide some method of address verification as well.
Right. I guess, and that would tie me to bring me my second question to the captain, being a voting assistance officer. What kind of outreach, specifically, let's say the Army, what are you doing to make sure that those that are deployed know that you're there and know, I mean, I'm sure if they don't know that they have to get their address updated or whatever within the before 45 days, so you have 45 days to turn it around, it makes it more difficult. I know that when I was deployed to Iraq, there was a poster on the wall that said, if you have any questions, here's your VAO. But that was it. I mean, I never met the VAO, I knew nothing about it, and I had to go seek the VAO out. So what kind of proactive outreach are we trying to do?
Thank you, sir. At my level, we have voting assistance officers at the battalion and each of the company levels. We receive information from the Federal Voting Assistance Program, and we push that information down to the company levels. We get the posters off of the Federal Voting Assistance Program website. We hang them up, but we can't force soldiers to come into our office. I can't force a soldier to go in and see his voting assistance officer. We make it known who we are, where we are, and it's on the soldier to come in and talk to us, sir. Right. We will provide them with whatever assistance they need. If they need to know when an election is happening, we will give them that, how to request a ballot, how to register to vote. We get all of that information from the Federal Voting Assistance Program website, and we pass it on to the soldier and allow them to use our computers, sir.
Is it a passive process, or is it active? Are you out there holding briefings or, telling folks you're there? Because I'm sure that the folks that are deployed at the COPS and FOBs have a lot of other things on their mind than coming to seek you out.
Yes, sir. We are out there as much as we can be. We are out at COPS and FOBs, and we do have soldiers. We can have soldiers from anywhere from 3 to 5 to 7 different COPS at one time. So, and soldiers may be out and then they come back in, but we're out there as much as we can be, sir. We let them know who we are. We push information out to those to the units that those soldiers are assigned or attached to. So, and every battalion has voting assistance officers. So whatever battalion they're attached to, they can go and see another voting assistance officer. It doesn't have to be the one in their own unit.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Chair. I yield back.
Thank you very much. And we proceed now, Ms. Harsler of Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is such an important hearing. Last year, as I went through my district, I have Fort Leonard Wood and Whiteman Air Force Base, and I can tell you at almost every town hall that we had, this issue came up, and the outrage and frustration of people that the thought that we have men and women in harm's way, they're putting their life on the line, and then not being able to vote is just abominable. And so I'm so glad we're having this hearing, and I appreciate your efforts to try to make sure that they have a right to vote. But I wanted to follow up on, I was too, like Dr. Heck, was concerned about this report that 1 out of 3 soldiers reported that they wanted to vote but failed to do so because they didn't receive a ballot or because the ballot was too late. That's just shocking, and it's unacceptable. And I wanted to just clarify again, what are the reasons that 1 out of 3 soldiers who wanted to vote couldn't? What are the problems? You mentioned the addresses, but Mr. Kerry, what other problems are there that could cause that?
Well, we had problems also with ballots getting out late, past the deadline. Case in point, New York was granted a waiver because they had a very aggressive ballot delivery process in place, and they even missed that deadline. And that was 50,000 ballots that were delivered 7 to 12 days after the waiver deadline that they were given. And then Illinois had a number of problems as well. That was about 4,000 ballots. Another part of this, but I go back to the being able to post these ballots online. The issue about posting the ballots online is that you don't have to wait for your ballot to arrive by mail. You can go online, you can download it, and you can print it out and you can vote it. Now, granted, there's going to be people that are going to not have that online access. And we're working with the MWR cafes. There's 1,000 MWR internet cafes in Iraq and Afghanistan, and 135 of these mobile ones. We're working with them in order to be able to try to put the widgets on those desktops in order to be able to provide an easy access, as well as printers, in order to be able to see if they can actually get this printed out. That to me represents the long-term solution.
Sounds good. Mrs. Seiler, you mentioned you're advocating for the email versus the fax because there aren't many fax machines, and you mentioned online. So what is the difference here? With an email, would it be scanned, I assume? You would scan it and then email it.
That's correct, and that's what these voters did. They scanned those voted ballots and they emailed them back to us, and then they had the same privacy protections, or attempted privacy protections. Obviously, it's a hard copy ballot coming in, but we make every effort, as does my colleague, to make sure that is, once the signature is verified, the ballot is separated, and then it's duplicated onto a ballot once it's separated from its cover sheet. So we make every effort to really preserve the privacy of the voter to the greatest extent possible.
So to be able to do the email voting, you would have to change law. Is that what you were saying?
California's law would have to be changed.
Oh, California's law.
So that's what we're seeking. The laws vary from state to state on this, apparently, and our group of election officials in California is supporting legislation to allow us to accept those email ballots. This is on the return side. We are able to email the ballots out, so that's not an issue. If we get very close to an election, somebody calls from Iraq, we can email that ballot to them.
Okay. Go back to the states, Mr. Kerry. I know I had heard as well that there are certain states, due to the primaries and other issues, that were kind of the holdup in this. What can be done, or what needs to be done within these states to help get them out? Do they need to change their primary dates, or do we need to change? What do we need to do here?
Most states are responding by changing their primaries. Some states with late primaries also have very quick canvassing and election result turnarounds, and so they're able to actually get the ballots out 45 days prior, even with late primaries. But for most states, they have more extensive post-election canvassing requirements, and so it requires them to, if they're going to be able to get the ballots out 45 days prior, most states are saying they have to change their primary date.
Have any of them done that yet?
Yes, ma'am, a number have, including a number that were granted a waiver in the 2010 cycle. So they probably won't be needing another late primary election waiver.
Okay, very good. Well, thank you for your efforts. Keep it up, and please continue to do everything possible to make sure that our soldiers' vote counts, because they're the reason we're able to vote and have freedoms. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Horstler, for your leadership on this issue. It's now my turn, and again, I'm just so grateful for all of you being here today. You really are giving us great information. I'd also like to point out that this week we received a report, The Military Voting in 2010, A Step Forward but a Long Way to Go, by Eric Eversole. This is by the Military Voter Protection Project. We'll be providing this to all the committee members. It's a study published by the Military Family United's Military Voter Protection Project and the AMVETS Legal Clinic at the Chapman University School of Law. And at this time, I'd like to move for unanimous consent that it be included in our record. Hearing no objection, it's included. I'd like to reference part of this report, and that is the fact, and it was also in an article by J. Christian Adams in the Examiner, the Washington Examiner, that sadly 14 states in the District of Columbia failed to comply with the 45-day standard. As a former election commissioner, that really startled me. I can remember in the campaign hearing over and over again where states had not complied with the 45 days. But I'd like to hear how it was done. And so, Mr. Crapes, how was the 45-day preparation of the ballot achieved in Lexington County?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, the 45 days, we are one of the larger counties in South Carolina. There's about 10 large counties, and we're number 4 or 5, depends on which way you hold your head on when you're counting on the day there. We're one of the ones that get our ballot styles up and checked and authorized first, and so we're able to get out to 45 days. But there is no county in South Carolina that does not meet the 45-day deadline. If you do, we have to answer to a lot of people, and we don't want to do that. Last election, we were 55 days in Lexington County getting the ballots mailed out, so we don't have any problem at all with the 45 days there. Mr. Carey, if I may back up for a moment, was talking about having the voter go online and view his or her ballot style online there. The problem with that in Lexington County and some of the other larger counties, we have 70 to 110 different ballot styles in some of our counties because of school boards, etc. we have on our ballots. We would still have to come up with some sort of electronic way to match that person through the system to a specific ballot, because we can have one person on one street corner and his neighbor next door being a totally different ballot style. And I've had a lot of problems with that, call in and say, well, so-and-so voted this way. That's something I think we ought to look into with the ballot styles, to be able to view them online and possibly even vote online.
And Ms. Seiler, how did you address that in San Diego?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We address this by, our filing period ends at 88 days before the election. Very often there's an extension. We too have hundreds, we have up to 600 different ballot styles, but we work very closely with our printers. So we have, it's a tight deadline for us, but we are working constantly with our printers to make sure that our ballot layouts are sent to them and that they are ready to go, and that everybody who is on our military and overseas file as of the 54th day is in that 45-day mailing. So it's really just a process that we've honed by working with our suppliers.
Well, I'm really impressed by both of your positive attitude, because it'd be easy to point out that you have split precincts, you have referendums, you have municipal elections, you have incorporations, you have annexations, and that you didn't complain. I'm impressed. At the same time, Mr. Carey, you've also been working with local election commissions in regard to the 45 days. What kind of advice have you given them?
If they have compliance problems, we've offered to help them as much as possible. We were actually able to find some unique solutions to some states who were having concerns about not being able to get the ballots out 45 days prior. And we were able to examine their requirements and actually recommend some unique solutions that allowed them to get the ballot out on time. The biggest thing is, going back to the online system. For our 17 states, we were able to have precinct level ballots that were down to the individual precinct, delivered to the voter online. Statewide systems for $65,000 to $75,000. And so, that represents to us a real good opportunity in order to be able to reduce the burden of filling absentee ballots and stuffing the ballots and getting them sent out.
And as an indication of how important what you're saying and how important this is to the American people, we will have a second round and begin with Ms. Susan Davis.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I think it's clear from a lot of the comments that you've made that in many ways the MOVE Act is kind of leading the way and doing some things that perhaps are not being done in states. And one of the things that was actually eliminated is the notary signature. And I understand neither Mr. Crapes nor Ms. Seiler, you have that requirement in your state. But is that a problem, do you think? Have you seen any reason why that was perhaps not something that should have been part of the MOVE Act? How would our soldiers have found those notaries in the field?
Well, actually, it's not a notary for us. It's just a witness signature. It has been eliminated from the UOCAVA requirements on our ballots there. So that's how we can email them back and forth. But it's not eliminated for the average citizen in the county there.
Is there something we can learn from that, Ms. Seiler?
California has not had a notary requirement for mail ballots, to my knowledge. We have had a requirement back in the late 70s that people had to supply a reason, and that was eliminated in 1979. And we have had complete sort of no excuse absentee voting since that time. And I think that what we learn from that is that voters love it. And it has really, we have been promoting the permanent vote by mail for our domestic military as well as our overall population of voters. And we have seen our turnout really rise above the statewide average and above that of all of our neighbors in Southern California.
As we think about electronic voting in the future too, I mean, is there any reason that people should be concerned about some of the fraud issues that are raised often when it comes to absentee voting?
In San Diego County, we check every single return envelope that arrives in our office, and we actually compare the signature on that envelope with the signature that we have on file. So we believe that the process is very fair, very precise, very clean, and we do not believe that we have evidence of any kind of widespread fraud in our mail ballot voting.
Mm-hmm.
Representative Davis, on the notary issue, the law actually says that the state cannot reject a ballot for not having a notary. It doesn't say that the MOVE Act doesn't say the state can't ask for a notary, and we can't compel the states to take that off their books or take that off their ballots. So that might be something, if you're looking at how that issue could be addressed. That might be one of those aspects. As far as the Federal Voting Assistance Program right now, we're not participating. We don't have programs right now for the electronic return of a voted ballot. We're not doing an internet voting program like they did with voting over the internet in 2000 or the SERV project in 2004. There is a requirement in the National Defense Authorization Act of 2002 and 2005 that the Department field a electronic absentee voting demonstration project where military voters can cast their ballots in a federal election. And it allows us to wait until the Election Assistance Commission has developed guidelines. We're working very closely with the Election Assistance Commission and the National Institutes of Standards and Technology to develop that. But that is a requirement on the Department of Defense to eventually be working towards fielding an internet voting system.
And as far as you know from what you've seen to this date, are there any issues that would jump out at you that you think would need to be addressed at that time?
We're exploring a lot of those issues. I mean, we're not at the point where we believe that we can reliably deploy an internet voting system by the Department of Defense. There is benefit in the diversity of the election system that we have right now. With 7,800 election jurisdictions, being able to attack any one jurisdiction's election system will have a lot less effect than attacking, let's say, a centralized DOD system. So that in and of itself provides a lot of security. I think it needs to be weighed into any of those analyses.
Thank you. And if I could quickly, Captain Jackson Gillespie, I'm sure that from where you sit, you would love to see everyone out in the field, FOBs, everyone included, be serious and interested in voting. But that probably isn't a reality that you deal with every day. Is there anything that you think could be done to encourage even more than what you're doing in the outreach that would change the statistics? Or is it merely that people are very, very focused on the job at hand and they're just not as engaged in it because they're away from their communities?
Thank you, ma'am. I do believe that once you're in theater, you are very focused on your mission at hand. I mean, that is your priority while you are there. I can't say that there are those who wanted to and couldn't vote because I don't know. I do know we assist where we can, and we've also, in my unit, we've also, or units that I've been in, we would incorporate voting assistance with other things that we had going on, like a personal asset inventory, where we account for everybody. And at that time, where they're signing their name, saying, "Hey, I'm present and accounted for. Hey, have you registered to vote? Do you need any assistance with registering to vote?" So we would possibly incorporate it with something else, but we do what we can to help everybody out. And I think those who really want to vote, we're able to help them.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Thanks for what you do.
Thank you very much, Ms. Davis. And we now proceed to Mr. Kaufman.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me just say for the record that I, along with many Americans, are not supportive of Internet voting, and in fact, deeply opposed to it. And I understand scanning documents and then emailing them where you have a hard copy, which is a voted ballot. I certainly understand that, but obviously concerned when it goes beyond that. Let me just say this. In the state of Colorado, election law is that we don't have same-day registrations. So if somebody shows up to the polls and they don't have, they're not on, they're not shown as registered to vote in the poll book, then they're handed a provisional ballot, and they vote that provisional ballot, and that ballot is kept separate. And then the respective county clerks then vet that ballot to make sure that that person had the legal right to cast that ballot. And so actually the election isn't closed out, and I think the county clerks have a couple weeks to do that. So the election isn't closed out for a couple weeks. But if a military ballot arrives 1 minute after 7 p.m. On the Tuesday of the election, it doesn't count. And so has there ever been consideration, absent the focus on Internet voting, for those ballots that come having a standard across the country, just as we have the 45-day standard, that there, if the ballot is shown to be having been mailed from the overseas duty station prior to the election, that in fact that ballot be counted in the same way that a provisional ballot be counted.
The Department of Defense recommends to the states that they allow up to 15 days after the election for the ballots to be returned, so long as they're voted by Election Day. And a number of states have that or better. But many states also require the ballot to be returned on Election Day.
Okay. And let me just say, having served in a forward operating base in a fairly remote area on the western side of Iraq, the mail system was abysmal. I mean, just absolutely abysmal by the time it got to us or by the time it got out, as well as we didn't have fax machines. There was very little connectivity out there. So I think that that's something that we ought to look at in terms of having a uniform standard, just as we have now on the registration system. And I think also on, I understand that there were a number of states that were not in compliance with the Act in the last election cycle for a variety of reasons, but to say the 45-day requirement. Were actions taken by the Justice? Some states apply for waivers, but I don't think any waivers were granted, is my understanding. Maybe you could respond to that.
There's 12 original applications. One state withdrew. The remaining 11, 6 were denied, 5 were granted.
Oh, 5 were granted.
And of the 5 that were granted, 1 failed to comply. I personally called up the election officials to tell them what their status was. The Department of Justice was with me on the calls to the states that were being denied waivers, and the Department told them immediately that the Assistant Attorney General had authorized enforcement action, and they'd like to enter into negotiations at that point with the state in order to be able to figure out the best resolution.
Was action taken, though? I mean, I don't see where formal action was taken by the Justice Department as it would occur on another voting rights issue. Did the Justice Department take formal action and sanction any of these states?
Yes, sir. In all 14 of these states, the Department of Justice either took on board, I believe, I don't know the exact terminology, I'd have to ask the Department of Justice. The state took effective action themselves, and the Department accepted that, or they actually went to federal court and either got consent decrees or got a federal decree from that federal court. But in all these cases, action was taken by the Department of Justice.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And for the record, I'm wondering if you could get back, if we could have a summary of that action that was taken by non-complying states.
Yes, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Kaufman. And I, again, remain really impressed at the positive attitude of our registrars, because I do know the challenges you face. And one that has been mentioned, I'd like to know how each of you, Mr. Crapes, Ms. Seiler, how do you address maintaining current addresses, particularly the military, or because of their deployment, their travel? How in the world do you keep their address current and in good faith make every effort? And also, even prior to that, keeping their registration current. And so, Mr. Crapes and then Ms. Seiler, if y'all would tell us, how do you work with young people and their family members too, the military families, on registration and maintaining current addresses?
Well, we try to basically reach out to them as much as we possibly can. I go talk to several high schools locally, which basically graduates these young adults that are into the military then, and explain to them what the situation is and why they need to basically keep it updated if they're wanting to vote. As far as if someone is deployed and sends something to us, we inform them through email to please keep your addresses updated, etc., with us, so that we can make sure if there's any election that you need to vote in the future, we can get you from there. And if there's local family members in the county from a reservist that's activated, the family members are contacted to basically try to keep the addresses updated, because they will have the most recent address of their deployed father or child, or whatever, father, child, son, daughter, whatever it may be, that's in the 4-way basis. So that's but primarily it's through education with the high schools there.
Thank you. And Ms. Seiler?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Yes, we have a couple of tools. I don't know that any are perfect. As I mentioned earlier, it would really be nice to have some sort of automatic database that we could run up against. But we do have our tracking system, which allows the voters to track their registration. They can track the address that we have on file for them and so forth. So that's one avenue. We work with the bases. Our staff work with the bases at some of the major military installations to make sure that they have information, voter registration forms, and so forth. We have our own voter form online, which actually serves as a permanent voter registration, and as we send out any information to the voter, if that comes back as undeliverable and we get updated information, we update the voter's record and then send them a notice that we've updated their record. And finally, we have noticed that with the MOVE Act, the voting assistance officers have been, at least in our county, they have been more diligent around January of each year, urging the service personnel to re-register to vote or to let us know of any address changes.
Well, thank you again, and it's really been inspiring, this hearing. And Captain Jackson Gillespie, thank you for your enthusiasm and service in Afghanistan. And Mr. Carey, we look forward to working with you for any changes. And again, I know personally the great work of Mr. Crapes and his commission. And Ms. Seiler, it's great to see you again. I'm really honored. I had the privilege of serving with Ms. Seiler as an election observer in Bulgaria in June 1990. And she and I have both seen the success of free and democratic elections, where a country has evolved from the day we arrived there, a totalitarian state, to be a free market democracy and a great ally today of the United States. And that's where elections can make such a difference in the United States and around the world. If there are no further questions, we shall be adjourned. Thank you.